Welcome to the Venture Playbook Podcast by SIA. This is the podcast where we dive deep into the world of venture building, innovation and growth, speaking with leaders who are pushing the boundaries in their industries. I'm your host, Colm Heaney, and today we have a fantastic guest joining us, Ruairí Kell, Head of Innovation at Dublin Airport Authority. Ruairí has had a fascinating career spanning corporate innovation, consulting and startups. He's worked as an innovation lead at Accenture's The Dock, where he helped design and launch transformative solutions. Before that, he was part of the team at Boxever, where he worked on pioneering AI-driven customer data platforms. He has also been deeply involved in startup ventures and advisory roles. And now, as Head of Innovation at DAA, he's leading the charge on innovation at one of Ireland's most critical infrastructure hubs, Dublin Airport, where they're tackling major challenges in aviation, passenger experience and sustainability. So Ruairí, welcome to the pod. It's great to have you here today.
Yeah, and it's great to be here, Colm. No, really excited, styling in from sunny Dublin or something like that. And really great to be here and chat to you a little bit around innovation.
Yeah, fantastic. And we've been really looking forward to having you on today. So it's great that we finally got it in the diary. And Ruairí, I suppose there's no better place to start than from the beginning, and I'm sure our listeners would love to hear about your journey to date. And as I mentioned in my introduction, you've worked across corporate innovation, startups, now you're in a semi-state organisation. So I was wondering if you could you describe maybe that venture building skill set and how it has applied across the different stages of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you mentioned venture building, and it's something I've been a part of, particularly in the past, across a number of different ways in terms of different startups that I've been a part of, and venture building for some corporates that I've worked on in the past as well. I think it's really important to have those skill sets when it comes to innovation and when it comes to just your day-to-day job for a lot of people. Knowing the ins and outs of what's required to set up a new business, even just from a concept, means you kind of got a holistic view of every opportunity, every challenge, every activity that you might need to tackle when you're really looking at any particular problem or any opportunity that you have. So when it comes down to things like anticipating different streams of work, looking at ways to monetize new ideas or things like that, even with what I do today in innovation, really coming at that from a venture building background is really important. And I think having been part of startups and then built ventures for corporates all over the world, I've seen how important it really is to put your hand at many different things. You mentioned skill sets, and that really encompasses, you can try and encompass the entire range of your abilities. So even if it means jumping into something you're uncomfortable with, getting a little bit technical when you're not so technical, jumping into project management or into finances, and it might not be something you've done before, but having the willingness to get stuck in with a bit of grit and determination is really what's going to help you out there.
I love that, and I love how you mentioned around that holistic view and with that 360 view of the organisation, what's happening in the front end, what's happening in the back end, and it's important to have that sort of full scope and understanding of the organisation. And I'd be quite interested, say, from your experiences, your previous experiences, or even your current, is there any specific experiences that have maybe shaped your approach to innovation and how you work today?
Yeah, I mean, I always think when it comes to approaches to innovation, people have either no idea, they just think it's a term for doing something new, or they have a very kind of strict idea of innovation is just a design thinking methodology or something like that. And I think you correctly pointed out, right? It comes from this holistic view, is a much more tangible way of approaching something. For me, I think I've seen a big shift in the innovation space away from, traditionally you would have had that design thinking view, right, on everything. But even you see kind of the people who pioneered that, so your Stanfords and your IDEOs, they're moving away from that now. And part of the reason is that there's been this shift towards what they call human-centered design, right? So really focusing on the end user and what they want out of it. But that's grown even more into even more of a holistic view, which becomes your systems thinking approach. And that means you're looking at every single aspect, every single touch point, every single system that may be interacting with whatever the solution you're designing, every single person that may be interacting with that, every single knock-on effect from what you're doing. And having a view of that and having a varied background in your team and in what you're doing really, really helps to achieve that. So, it's not just about one skill set as kind of an innovation designer or a project manager. It's more about having a really, really varied skill set, having a knowledge of a lot of different things. So when they say kind of a jack of all trades and master of none, it doesn't really apply in innovation. I think having a lot of jack of all trades type of people can really, really help, because you know that you can, whatever comes up as part of that, you're really building that out, and you can do that with a systems thinking style approach.
Yeah, I love how there's been that shift from, as you mentioned, design thinking, and you also mentioned around human centric. So is it now you have that sort of combination then of the human centric approach combined and aligned with the systems thinking, and then that is then defining what your outputs are going to be or how they're going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, human centered design at its core is a very simple concept. You're starting with the end user, and you're working backwards from that, right? And that's always going to be important, no matter what you're doing. Even when people talk about B2B type solutions, ultimately it's B2B to C, or it's B2B to B2B to C. So there's always an end user at some of these points, and you really need to focus on them and what they're able to do with the solution. But like you say, about joining that up with systems thinking and with all the great benefits that design thinking did bring through, in the last 20 or 30 years, all of that together really, really helps you then have some form of framework, a lot of different methodologies and tools, and you can pull from the right things at the right time in order to shape your project in the right way. Still, I think it's really important to have that holistic view of everything that's ongoing at the one time.
Absolutely. No, it's fascinating insights there, Ruairí. And I guess just sort of maybe on to like a new topic. So we're recording this in March 2025. So I think it'd be remiss of me not to mention AI, automation, smart infrastructure. And as I was reading, 2025 has been dubbed the defining year of AI. And I keep hearing time and time again that the agents are coming, and well, they're here. And I know at the start of the year as well, Meta announced AI is going to be replacing mid-level engineers by the end of 2025. And I suppose a lot of the organizations that we're working with as well, they're wanting to really figure out what role AI is going to play, where it's going to fit into their organization, what they can automate, what they can't, and really how this is going to actually impact growth as well. So Ruairí, I'd be quite interested or curious to hear around really what role do you see AI and automation playing out in the future of airports, and whether it's going to be maybe on the passenger experience side, airport operations, or even security for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, when you framed the question, right, you talked a good bit about the automation side of things. I think that's a lot where AI is playing these days. For me, on a personal level, I find when people are talking about AI, they're talking about really two different buckets of things. One is ChatGPT and all the other kind of chat-based LLM interfaces that are out there, right? And that's kind of where their knowledge is. The other side is what you mentioned is really automation. A colleague of mine mentioned to me the other day, when we're looking at AI, what are we actually really looking at? Because automation through AI is something that could have been done even 20 years ago. It's just that now AI makes some of these things faster. So are you really doing something unique and innovative when you get into that space or not? But to bring it back to your actual question around where does that sit within an airport and within the aviation space, I think a lot of it's around making things faster. That's always the key to making travel journeys more efficient is speed. And that's, I think, where it's going to sit a lot of the time. Now, what that looks like, I don't think the aviation industry really knows yet. I think there's a lot of airlines, airports, and third parties around the world playing around with this stuff and trying to figure it out. And that's fine. But implementing that and actually seeing the benefits is going to be something that I don't think the passengers are really going to notice. Okay. I think it's going to more sit in the back end systems. There's a lot of operational processes that go on inside airports and airlines that the passenger never really sees, and they will feel the impact, but they may not actually even know that they're feeling the impact, because it's all sitting in these back end systems. It could be a baggage system, it could be in security, it could be in safety, it could be in check-in processes, it could be in anything else. And I think that's really where it's going to sit. I do think it's going to sit in the automation space mostly. I mean, there'll be some front end bits and pieces around bots and so on that are going to really help around customer service and so on, but they're kind of industry agnostic, and so that'll just become part of the day to day. But really, in that automation space, I think it's going to sit in back end systems, and passengers are going to have to not necessarily view it, but maybe they'll know that it's happening at some point.
Yeah, so you're so spot on when you say obviously those two buckets, the large language models, and then you got the automation. And I think there's definitely almost a learning piece or an educational piece that organizations will need to see it, fully understand what capabilities are of these tools. And and again, you're right in saying around like automation, it's about speed and the quickness and enhancing and optimizing, I think, certain processes or certain workflows within that space. But quite fascinating as well around how the passenger won't actually overtly experience that. It's going to be in the back end. So that's very, very interesting in the aviation space. That's potentially how it's going to be being applied.
No, absolutely. Like I say, I think it's one of those things that the passenger journey is what it is for most elements. You book your flight, you come to the airport, you've got security, you get on your flight and you land on the other side, and there's a few digital interaction touch points in there, of course, and things that everyone's trying to get a better hold on. But a lot of the actual real work goes on in the background.
Yeah, so I know you've mentioned a few times around sort of this customer experience, the UX. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd imagine in airports, maybe it's the PX, the passenger experience.
Yes, exactly.
That's sort of going to be at the forefront. And as I said, I'm doing a bit obviously reading about airports and the aviation space and doing a bit of research, obviously before the pod. And I was just coming across that airports have always been at the crossroads of technology, logistics, and that customer/passenger experience. And I know we touched on AI there and automation, but if we had that crystal ball, or if we were to look at, say, some of the current trends that are happening in the industry, where do you think maybe 10 years time in the future, what do you think the biggest changes would be to the passengers' experience in the airport?
I think we've kind of already talked about it a little bit, right? Which is the idea of speed.
But what is that speed? Is that speed through security? Is it to kind of be at the airport an hour instead of 2 hours before?
Exactly. I think it's going to be a lot more of that, and AI will have its place to play in it. But there's lots of other innovations and industry trends and so on that are happening at the moment. Security is getting better and more efficient, and that's worldwide. So that'll really help. Airlines are getting better at what they call the turnaround process. So how quick an aircraft can come in and then turn around to pick up the passengers at that airport and fly off again. And the security, because the security process is getting better, that means you need less time for the passengers to be there. We're also getting better at things like baggage transfers and different things like that. So as all of these systems become more and more efficient, it actually does have that knock-on impact on the passenger, and I think they're going to see that in terms of the speed, which means ultimately then the time that they need to spend at the airport or worrying about these things. We say kind of in the airport world, all you really need is a safe passenger and a safe bag, and by that we mean they're secure, right? That they've gone through some sort of security process, but everything else around that is additional. So the closer we get to kind of making sure that passenger is safe and secure in a quick manner, and the same for their bag, then we can speed up the rest of the process and hopefully make that process better and more exciting and more interesting, and maybe from an airport perspective and from an airline perspective, maybe a little bit more commercially beneficial too.
Yeah, so that safety and security, that's almost the guiding north star when it comes to the innovation and into the speed. So as long as the airport or the airline can ensure that security and safety of the passenger, then everything can flow from there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we like to think, particularly at DAA and at our airports, we do a pretty good job of that, not only from the security and safety side of things, but managing the passenger through the time that we have them in our airports, and that's a really, really good thing, to be able to give them that good experience, to give them that efficiency, and to make sure that everything is safe and secure, and they've got a good peace of mind as they're getting on their flight.
So Ruairí, and if you don't mind, I'd like to touch upon sustainability and green innovation in the aviation space. And when I hear the words sustainability and airports in the same sentence, I can't help but think there's a slight juxtaposition. And as we know, obviously major energy consumers, the terminals to run, the ground operations, there's the air traffic control, and now there's a hell of a lot more regulatory commitments as well. Like there's the EU's Fit for 55 package, there's the airport carbon accreditation schemes, there's the broader net zero targets. So I can imagine that airports are under a lot more growing pressure to say rethink the energy use, the waste management, any of the environmental impacts. So I think our listeners would love to understand, maybe from your perspective, where should an airport start when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, look, given the nature of the industry, there's a lot of eyes on airports with regards to sustainability, and a lot of eyes on us at DAA particularly. And we can't change the airlines themselves, right? They'll operate independently in that regard. But there's plenty that airports still can do in terms of the areas that we do control, and you pointed out a couple of them there specifically. Even for us at DAA, we recently, for anyone that is interested, we did recently publish our ESG strategy through to 2030. So that's public and available for anyone to read online. But within that, you'll see, there's plenty of different things that we can do. So, we can do things that are going to impact carbon emissions, right? So our absolute levels of carbon emissions at both Dublin Airport and Cork Airport are down, 22%, 33% respectively in the last kind of 5-6 years. And they continue to go down. We've brought in a lot of electric vehicles and HVO, so hydrogenated vegetable oil powered vehicles, for a lot of our ground operations. So that's actually really, helpful to mitigate a lot of our emissions and so on. And in the future, we're going to be supporting SAF, so Sustainable Aviation Fuel trials. So for the aircraft from the airlines that can take this, we will actually be able to support that in terms of our refueling ability and so on as well. So I think that's kind of the broader piece, and that's kind of where a lot of airports are going with this. We're doing some of our own, more innovative little bits and pieces as well, and starting out from that trial perspective to see what works and what doesn't work and what actually has an impact. So even things like we've recently installed solar farms, and we've done some testing last year. On the innovation side of things, we did some testing around photobioreactors. I believe that we were the first place in the world to have a photobioreactor that focuses on NO2, not CO2. And that's in our busing zone, so it's reducing the amount of nitrogen oxide in the air from those idling buses that are there. So there's a million different things you can do. We've got a big sustainability team in DAA, and they look after a lot of this stuff, and we work very closely with them with my team with innovation. But really, it's just the tip of the iceberg. Everything we do is going to have a sustainability lens on it. Every new piece of infrastructure that we build, every new innovation that we do, every new piece of technology. I think DAA's vision is to be airport industry leaders in this space, and delivering excellence within sustainability. And we're really kind of focusing on that and doing as much as we can, even within an industry that may have a lot of eyes on it with regards to this specific topic.
Wow, that's very, very interesting, Rory, as well. And yeah, I love the ambition to be number one, and I can't see why not. That's yeah, very, very interesting. And I love how closely the innovation team are working with this sustainability team as well. And there's that sustainability lens on each of what you're carrying out, whatever projects you may be working on. So yeah, thank you for that, Rory. And I suppose maybe I'd like to just sort of move on around, say, constraints in innovation. And I know every innovator faces constraints, and there can be regulatory hurdles, budget limitations. There can be that resistance to change. I can imagine in a semi-state organisation there could be a lot of stakeholders to manage. There could be the conflict in interest or priorities of that. So a lot of time we see when we're working on innovation projects and in the innovation space, we want to always keep the momentum going. So I was wondering if you could maybe give some insights around how do you keep the momentum going when pushing for innovation in such a large, complex organisation like DA?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is a large organisation and it is relatively complex. But I think, even the fact that it's semi-state, it doesn't necessarily stifle innovation particularly. I think it just changes the nature and the way in which you approach innovation. And look, you'll probably know this yourself, Colm, but there's two types of innovation. There's your net new. You're starting with something brand new and you're building it out, and then there's your incremental innovation. And as you know, Dublin Airport is a 24/7, 365 or 364. We're closed on Christmas Day, but 24/7, 364 operation, and so there's always things happening. And plugging into that as part of your innovation means that you can do those smaller incremental pieces of innovation really, really well, really quickly, and build on different things over time. That's why, if you're a regular traveler through one of our airports, you may not see change, you may not notice the change because it's very, incremental and happening slowly over time. But if you were to come back, once a year or once every couple of years, you'd see lots of bigger changes that you're like, oh, that wasn't there last time. Because, over time, those incremental innovations add up and become something, better. So, a great example is, we can build on a lot of the good work that we're already doing. So we're very good at, giving passengers a good journey through our airports and supporting them in that, getting their flights in a very kind of safe, comfortable, efficient manner. And now we're really looking at how can we replicate that digitally. So how can we give them that same experience in a digital fashion and, get on board with that a little bit better, because we can do it very well physically and we're getting better at doing it digitally now. So, it means we can kind of then do that and do that in an incremental manner, while at the same time then those larger projects, we're not going anywhere. We've got a long future ahead of us, so we can take our time with some of those larger projects. It might mean a slightly longer timeline on what we're doing there, but we have the time and the patience, and we know that therefore we can make sure that we're delivering excellence when we get there. And take time. And I think that, innovation is hard anywhere, right? I've worked at a lot of the biggest companies in the world and worked for some of the biggest companies in the world and helped some of them out. And, I don't think anybody really wants change. That's maybe me speaking generally. There are certainly people who want change, but, rocking the boat is kind of, you're kind of changing embedded processes, embedded mindsets, embedded technologies, and so on. And so I don't even necessarily think the challenge is unique to DAA, to Dublin Airport, to semi-state organisations or anything like that. It's just that the way in which that manifests is probably slightly different because of the nature of who we are. So the underlying challenge is always the same. You've got to be able to change hearts and minds. You've got to be able to ensure that the innovation that you do has some form of positive impact on both the organization and, of course, then your end users, and in our cases is going to be our passengers and our airlines.
Yeah, no, you're again, as I say, it is that resistance to change, and that is industry agnostic. And yes, there will be willingness to change within some organizations, parts of organizations, but I think it's, as you say, around within that hearts and minds. How can you shift perspectives, and then, as you say, sort of that tangible output and showing that and that positivity for it. So yeah, so like within the Dublin, like within DAA, I know we mentioned around say the systems thinking, that human centric approach. But what would be say your teams and your approach to sort of the ideation phase of it, or because it is so like there's a problem obviously needs to be solved. So that problem came to maybe your team or your guys, or even in your previous experience as well, Ruairí. So are you sitting down? You've got the Miro board out. It's a war room style, and we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like any organization, right? You've kind of got your large company goals that are set out at the start of the year, and we want to make sure that we're aligned to those as an innovation team, and that we're working with all the other business units across the organization. And particularly because of the way DAA is structured with multiple airports in different parts of the group, and then even within kind of the Dublin campus, then you've got multiple different business units sitting in very different parts. We want to try and align with as much of that as possible. But in terms of the ideation and the way in which we will go about that, there's a couple of different approaches. Sometimes it's a request in, from the executive team or the board who are like, yeah, we really want to focus on this particular project, and you're like, great, let's take a look at that, let's see what we can do. Sometimes then it's more collaborative approach with one of the other particular teams. So we mentioned sustainability earlier. We do a lot of work with them, and we'll sit down with them and run specific ideation sessions around what do you want to do in sustainability next year. That could be the commercial team or the terminals teams, and we work very closely with them. So my team runs multiple different projects across the organization with these different teams hand in hand, and we'll split the work with them in order to make sure that those things happen. And so typically what we'll do is we'll sit down with them, we'll run workshops, we'll have our Miro boards, or a lot of as you can imagine in an airport, a lot of stuff is still done in person, so it's whiteboards and drawing things up on those, and then we have our own ideas as well. The team itself is very innovative, so we come up with some ideas, and we want to execute on those as quickly as possible. And typically we'll try and find things that we can get done quickly, and are going to have a real impact, whether that's in terms of the passenger experience or revenue or anything else.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned the whiteboards are still out. I say old school is still the best school. So and
exactly, it's the way to go. Yeah.
There's a lot said for that in person collaboration and the synergy and that atmosphere, and I think everyone just sort of feeds off that energy, and that's when the ideas really flow. But I think we're approaching nearly your time, and I just want to say it's been a brilliant conversation. And I say before we wrap up, we always like to ask our guests for say one piece of advice for those looking to drive innovation in those large scale, small scale, startup or the complex organizations. But I was thinking maybe we could flip the script on that and maybe ask yourself, maybe what's the one cardinal sin when it comes to driving innovation in these organizations, or if there's that one mistake you tell someone to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest mistake that I see is people going down the path just because they said they're going to do something and continuing with a project or an idea or an implementation that ultimately they know is wrong. I think it's really important to know when to stop, when to say that project isn't working and you're going to kill it, or when to, as we often like to say, when to pivot and when to change into something different. I'd say that the cardinal sin is not being flexible enough. Maybe that's what it is, right? Don't think that you've got it solved the first time around. I remember someone once said to me a long time ago, every project goes through a really messy phase, and it's in that messy phase that you decide, are we going to kill this, or are we going to go ahead with it? And more often than people would think, you're going to say, actually, we're going to kill this and we're going to stop it, or at the very least, we're going to change it to something radically different. So don't be afraid to be flexible and change things up, and don't take it too personally when things don't work and you have to change.
Fantastic insights, Ruairí, and flexibility is key. So, Ruairí, just want to say thanks very much for joining us today on the Venture Playbook Podcast. And if people wanted to say follow your work, connect, see what's going on with the AA Labs, where would be the best place to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. More than happy to connect, and also look for any of the updates on any of the things we've discussed today. Like I say, there's lots of stuff. We're a semi-state organisation, so there's lots of public stuff happening. So go check out the Dublin Airport and DAA websites, and you'll see a lot of stuff there. And our socials team do a great job as well. So I'm sure they'll be happy to engage as well.
Thank you, Ruairí. And that's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, make sure to follow, like, and share. We'll be back soon with another great guest, so stay tuned.